And I'll tell you another thing. The closer you get to God, the closer you get to God, the more obvious your shortcomings will be to you. You ever thought about that? When you get near perfect, when you stand yourself up next to perfect, then all your shortcomings and mistakes and sins are so obvious in the light. Yeah. So I hope you can follow what I'm saying. But I'm kept by the power of God. And folks, I read about people like Daniel. When you read about Daniel, you won't, about all these men of God, you'll read about their great failures. But when Daniel, what failures he had is not recorded in this book. But there's a lot of what he did that we should be willing to imitate and follow after him. Tonight, I'm thinking about Daniel. Daniel was a very young man when his country was overridden by the enemy. Nebuchadnezzar, I guess it was, came and carried away the very highly intelligent and the people who were up in the kingdom there in Judah, the great men of God that were highly educated and intelligent and whatever. They carried them away captive, and out of that number they carried away, the king had a group picked. He told his leaders to pick out from the children of Judah that had been carried away men of wisdom, men of ability, men who could be taught the religion, the language of the Chaldeans, who could serve in the king's court. You know, when you think about that, it'd be like cabinet ministers and cabinet secretaries, whatever, to our president. It's people with great ability. And so there were 4 that we can read about in the book of Daniel, at least 4. And one of those was Daniel. He was a man carried away, a young man carried away captive in a foreign land. And here in that foreign land, Daniel didn't lose his integrity. You would think that someone that was made a POW or whatever and had opportunity in the land of the enemy might just live a very ungodly life or whatever. But Daniel was he was a great man of God. I mean, he was great. And Daniel, when it came time, he was picked along with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as a select number to serve, to be trained in the ways of the Chaldeans and to serve in the king's court. The king said he wanted the food that he ate to be served to these people, Brother Darrell. Yeah. And you know, the king would no doubt have great food, the best food that was to be had. Exactly right. He had it. The best of the best was reserved for the king. And here these boys were that were chosen, were entitled to eat that food. But you know what about that food that was bad, folks? It was food that had been offered to idols. Now, when they offered in the old times, when sacrifices were made to idol gods, they didn't use all the animal. They didn't use all of the food. Just a little portion of it was actually sacrificed, but it was all offered to those idols. But what was left of that was what they ate of, Brother Darrell. And so here in the king, all his food and all that he had to eat and drink was of that particular offering, been offered unto idols. And here Daniel was, brought down into this country, and he had been selected with a high honor, a very, very high honor. He had been selected to serve in this court. And now here the eunuchs come and say, you're to eat of this particular food. You and all your captives are going to be served the very best food. And Daniel, the Bible says, Daniel purposed in his heart. That's what's on my mind tonight. He purposed in his heart. He made up his mind. He had a made-up mind. He wasn't vacillating back and forth. He had a made-up mind that he would not defile himself. And one of these things to a good, godly Jew was he did not break the Jewish law by eating food offered to idols. He just didn't do that. It was an ungodly thing to do. And Daniel made up his mind in this foreign land as a POW that he would not defile himself even in that country. Now I'm telling you folks, when you're around the brothers and sisters, or you're near the brothers and sisters in the church, and those that you go to church with and everything all like that, said, it's a lot easier to hew to the line than it is when you get plumb out of nowhere, out where nobody knows you. And you know what I'm talking about, folks. When you get it where nobody knows you, and I've been there, the temptation is greater, and the peer pressure to do good is not as great as it is among the brotherhood. But Daniel here was a man carried plumb away from his people, and here he made up his mind, already had his mind made up that he wasn't going to do wrong. So he purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself. And he had a made up mind. I want y'all to remember that, a made up mind. And we do better, folks, today if we had our minds made up before the problems come, before the temptations come. If you have your mind already made up that you won't defile yourself or will not do wrong, God willing and God helping you, you're a lot more likely to succeed in being a good, godly, righteous person than you are if you just go along this way and that way, every which way. But if you have your mind made up, folks, made up to do the right thing, then, Brother Willie, it's a lot easier to do so. Well, folks, Daniel had his mind made up, and he purposed in his heart, and you see what could have happened to him, folks. He could have been put to death because he refused to eat that which was on the king's table. And see, in those days, the king had the power of life and death. It wasn't like it is now. If you didn't look at the king in the right way, he could just put you to death just like that. And he answered to nobody. But here Daniel had made up his mind. He wouldn't defile himself. And here came the one that was in charge of those captives. And he said, and Daniel had become tender with him. He had a way with him. The eunuch liked Daniel, really had respect for him, but he also was afraid he'd lose his head if he didn't do what the king said. And he told, when Daniel requested to eat vegetables, just eat what they normally eat and let everybody else eat the king's food, he was afraid what would happen to him by not following the king's orders. But finally, Daniel persuaded him to let him for 10 days with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, these four, to eat just common, ordinary food and not to eat that offered to idols. And so said, after 10 days, you look at us and then make up your mind. And if we don't look better than these that are eating the king's food, then you do what you might. I don't know if Daniel would have ate the king's feet. I don't believe he would have. I believe he would have died first because his mind was made up and he was following God. Well, if you make up your mind to follow God and you've got you purpose in your heart to do so, God will help you. He will send you strong ability to do the right thing. But if you, I tell you what, if you want to believe the wrong thing and you continue to do so, God will send you delusions and let you fall on your face. But here after 10 days, Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they looked a lot better than all the others, all of them. And so from that point on, folks, for 3 years, the training period, 3 years, Daniel and his friends didn't have to eat anything but common, ordinary food. And they took the training, got trained in all the ways, and after the 3 years, did you know that Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were 10 times more knowledgeable, 10 times better than all the rest of them put together?
Amen.